Comrades and friends, I'd like to welcome you to this meeting with Dr. Mustafa Barghouti. What does Israel's new far-right government mean for the Palestinian struggle? This is kindly streamed by Arise, a festival of left ideas. I'm going to be chairing this evening. My name is Christine Blower. I'm a lifelong trade unionist and, of course, a lifelong supporter of the Palestinian case and cause. And I am a patron of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. I'm also a Labour member of the House of Lords. So, comrades and friends, this is a vital time for all of us who are interested in campaigning with Palestinians for their rights. With the arrival of the hard right government in Israel at the end of last year and following the groundbreaking report from Amnesty International and others about the crimes of the illegal occupation, all indications are that aggression and abuses against the people of Palestine are both intensifying and likely to intensify even more, acting against any possibility of an independent state for Palestine and the right to self-determination of the Palestinian people. And although attention in the media on Palestine comes and goes, we know that the struggle of the Palestinian people is an absolute constant. So we're delighted to have with us Mustafa Barghouti, whom I will introduce in a moment. But before we do hear from Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, we will hear from, I will introduce Simon Dubbins, who is the Director of International at Unite the Union, and he will be speaking on behalf of Labour and Palestine to make some opening remarks, and then I will introduce Dr. Mustafa Barghouti much more fully. So the floor is yours, Simon.
Thanks very much, Christine, and good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us. As you said, Christine, it's a critical moment in the Palestinian struggle. I always seem to begin contributions with those words, but I think that's absolutely true at the moment for all of the reasons that you're all aware of. We're going to hear from Dr. Barghouti in a moment. What I wanted to do was really just give colleagues joining us a little insight into Labour and Palestine and why it was set up, the background to it. So the structure was set up in 2018 by a number of unions, my own union, Unite, Unison, ASLEF, the Bakers Union, CWU and NUM. And the reason we set it up was because there was a belief amongst us that grassroots support for the Palestinian cause and Palestinian struggle was actually very widespread in the Labour Party, but was not being articulated and organised properly. There was a structure, Labour Friends of Palestine in the Middle East, but that was only an MP's grouping, and there was nothing else bringing it through. As trade unionists, we were well aware that the Labour movement, the trade union movement, has been on quite a journey in the last 20 years, and support for the Palestinian struggle has really increased dramatically, with many more delegations and many more acts of solidarity taking place. Indeed, even the Confederation now, the TUC, is fully on board with the apartheid narrative and understanding that Israel is practicing the crime of apartheid against the Palestinian people, and is supporting to some extent the boycott, divestment and sanctions campaign. My own union has got a full position of support for boycott, divestments and sanctions against Israel. And so many of us wanted to try, as particularly us as unions that were affiliated to the Labour Party, we wanted to try to push a better line on support for the Palestinian cause within the Labour Party. And we suspected that many activists would fully get on board with that, but lacked really the structure and confidence to do that, particularly in the climate that's existed within the last couple of years within the Labour Party. Well, I think that assumption has been absolutely borne out with the founding statement of Labour in Palestine, the principles that we were signing up to and the aims that we were trying to pursue. Over 12,000 members of the Labour Party have now signed up to that. There are supporters of Labour in Palestine in over 600 constituency Labour parties. We have held huge fringe meetings at the Labour Party conference for the last 3 or 4 years. We're talking in excess of 250 people attending those meetings. And I think it's fair to say that Labour in Palestine played a critical role in making sure that the groundbreaking motion was passed at Labour Party conference in 2021. That motion made it very clear that the Labour Party commits itself to taking effective measures, including sanctions, in order to end the decades-old illegal occupation of Palestine. And it also referenced very clearly the human rights and B'Tselem reports that identified Israel as practicing the crime of apartheid. Since then, obviously, Amnesty International has also produced a report to the same effect. Unsurprisingly, perhaps, the Labour Party leadership disowned that motion within 20 minutes of it being passed, despite the fact that it was passed on a show of hands and there wasn't even a need for a card vote. So looking ahead, what we tried to do after that was really hold meetings, and we have done with many CLPs, to explain to them the content of that motion, why it was supported, and that they would be really welcomed in expressing their support for it. Looking forward, we are just in the process now of producing another model motion that we hope CLPs will also endorse. That will be circulated probably in the next few days to all of our CLP supporters. We're hoping that way we can keep the issue of Palestine very firmly on the agenda within the Labour Party. We absolutely believe it's important that activists continue to have the confidence to talk about the issues despite the atmosphere and what's been happening again within the last few weeks. And we really do want to put pressure on the Labour Party to end its appalling silence about what is going on right now and the disgraceful human rights abuses and episodes of ethnic cleansing that are effectively taking place. So it's really important we do that. It's really important that we get the Labour Party to be absolutely clear it will oppose the anti-BDS legislation that this government is also bringing in. And it's important that the Labour Party continues to stand firmly on the side of the Palestinians, as it does with all oppressed and repressed people around the world. So thank you very much, Christine. It's a privilege to see Mustafa again. We met in Palestine a couple of years ago, and I've had the privilege to meet him and share platforms and so on here again, and I'm looking forward to listening to the contribution. Thank you very much. Back to you, Christine.
Thanks very much, Simon. So clearly a lot of good work being done by Labour in Palestine, but obviously more needs to keep happening, and it's absolutely important to keep pressure on the Labour front bench. So now we're going to move directly to Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, who joins us from Ramallah. Mustafa is a Palestinian physician, activist and politician who serves as the General Secretary of the Palestinian National Initiative. He has been a member of the Palestinian Legislative Council since 2006 and is also a member of the Palestine Liberation Organization Central Council. We're absolutely delighted that you could join us, Mustafa. The floor is yours to give us the best update that you possibly can from what's happening in Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening to everybody. And I'm so glad to be with you, and I'm really thankful that you gave me this opportunity to speak to this very good group of people. I want to start by expressing our deep sadness and condolences for the victims of the most recent earthquakes in Turkey and in Syria. We feel very sorry for all these victims that fell. And I hope we don't have similar earthquakes in Palestine. We had already 5 yesterday and today, but they were minor. So let's hope and pray that it won't get worse, because that's what we don't need now with all the complications that we already have. I want to start by explaining what are the results of the most recent Israeli elections and what kind of situation we are facing today. I would not be exaggerating if I say that we are really facing the most dangerous time since 1948 for Palestinians. What we've seen is the election of not only the most extreme and the most racist government in the history of Israel and the region, but actually a government that can be described as fascist, as a government that includes fascist ministers in it. And what we've seen in Israel is the merger between the extreme nationalism that Netanyahu represents with the rise of Jewish religious extreme fundamentalism. And that is new. The rise of extreme Jewish fundamentalism to the most important power in the Israeli government. And these people are advocating nothing but Jewish supremacy. We are used to speak about white supremacy in the case of the United States, but here we are talking really about something that is bluntly advocated, saying that the place of the land of Palestine, historic Palestine, is exclusive for Jewish people, and that right of self-determination in Palestine should only be for Jewish people. Among those who were elected, it's very important to clarify that to the audience. Among those who were elected and who are now ministers in the Israeli government is Ben-Gvir, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who was a member of Kahana movement, which was classified in Israel in 1994 as a terrorist organization, as well as in the United States. This man was not allowed to serve in the Israeli army when he was 18 years old because of his extreme positions. That same man, who was classified as terrorist and denied the right even to serve in the Israeli army, is now the Minister of Security in Israel, in charge of police force, in charge of police guard, border police, in charge of what happens in the Aqsa Mosque, and in charge of all presence where thousands of Palestinian prisoners are held. The other one is Smotrich, who is even more extreme, who was also taken to court for trying to conduct a terrorist attack, but he was released because the prosecutor did not want to expose the source of information. And that man is also now the Minister of Finance in Israel, and not only the Minister of Finance, but also he is now a minister in the Ministry of Defense, which means he has a say to whatever is decided regarding the occupied territories and for the civil administration. Both of these guys, in addition to other figures like Avi Maoz, are going to conduct the widest and biggest campaign for expanding settlements in the occupied territories, the illegal settlements. Smotrich supplying the money, Ben-Gvir organizing the expansion of settlements with the others. And of course, they will both do everything they can to conduct collective punishment against Palestinian people. But it's not just the government. What is interesting here to note is that the number of Israeli illegal settlers in the occupied territories in West Bank and Jerusalem is now more than 750,000. They have 15 members in the Israeli Knesset out of 120. As a matter of fact, Both Ben Gvir and Smotrich are settlers themselves. Ben Gvir is a settler in Kiryat Arba settlement, and Smotrich is also a settler in Kadumim in the north of the West Bank. They have 15 members who are settlers in the Knesset, but in addition to that, they have 22 people in the Knesset from different parties, not only the Jewish fundamentalist parties, but also from Likud party. These 22 members are advocating replacing the Aqsa Mosque with the Jewish temple. And that is, of course, a call for disaster. These guys are so extreme to the level that they have been calling to expel from the Knesset, the Israeli Knesset, any member who supports the Palestinian rights. In particular, Kassif, who represents the Democratic Front, was attacked, and they were demanding removing him from the Knesset. What we see here is a true fascist behavior, trying to silence the other voices, trying to silence any opposition to the policies of this government. But it is important to note here that this extremism is not only related to the extreme parties, but it is also related to the fact that this is the choice of the Israeli society. It is the Israeli society who has chosen these people to become the majority in the Knesset and to form the government. And that is very, very alert, very alarming, actually. And it really requires a very good understanding of the processes that are happening here. The second important point to note here is that Netanyahu is not moderate. I mean, he tries to represent himself as a moderate in comparison to these crazy fundamentalists, but in reality, he is the architect of this policy. He has been the architect of destroying any potential for negotiations, for destroying Oslo process, for destroying the whole idea of two-state solution, and for doing everything he could to prevent the establishment of a Palestinian independent state. So Netanyahu is not a moderate, he is the engineer and the organizer of this extreme fundamentalist government. And it is not acceptable what the United States representatives are trying to do by claiming that he's the one who's going to restrain this government. The third point is that, unfortunately, although there is now an opposition in the streets of Israel to this government because of its planning of taking over the control over the judiciary system and neutralizing the high court in Israel, and because of their policies in regard, their other fascist policies. But unfortunately, the majority of this opposition does not differ with these guys on the issue of Palestine and on the issue of the rights of the Palestinian people. One very alarming indicator here was the fact that when the government presented to the Israeli parliament a bill about taking away the citizenship from Palestinians who are engaged in resistance, that bill got not 64 votes, which are the votes of the parties of this government, but actually 89 votes, which means that even those who are in opposition to this government from different Zionist parties voted for that kind of oppressive measure against Palestinian people. So it is important here to say that there are people who are opposing this government from the perspective of sustaining the democratic system for Jewish people in Israel, but not for everybody. Maybe they are against it because it is taking wrong stance regarding LGBT, etc., LGBT rights, etc., but not when it comes to the Palestinian issue. It is important also here to look at the declared policy of this government. I mean, the policy that is not hidden, but actually expressed and declared. The first line in the program of the government is about annexing the West Bank. Annexing the West Bank means destroying the very last option of having an independent Palestinian state. It also says that the Eretz Israel, meaning in this case, the land of historic Palestine, is exclusive for Jewish people, and the right of self-determination in it is exclusive for Jewish people. Third, their program is about expanding settlements at a rate that is unprecedented. As you know, in addition to the hundreds of illegal settlements in the occupied territories, there is a number of settlement outposts that were created by settlers themselves without the permission of the Israeli government. And these outposts are considered illegal even from Israeli perspective. This new government plan is going to be legalizing 67 new outposts. That is 67 new settlements in the West Bank, including a new bill that will be passed in the Knesset soon, which allows them to reconstruct a number of settlements that were evicted before in the so-called peace process between Palestinians and Israel. More than that, they have also initiated, and that's my fourth point regarding the policy of this government, they have initiated acts of demolishing houses of Palestinians at large scale in Area C and in Jerusalem neighborhoods. As a matter of fact, there are 10,000 Palestinian homes in East Jerusalem that are threatened to be demolished. Why do we have this number? Simply because Israel does not give permits to Palestinians to build homes, neither in East Jerusalem nor in Area C in most of the times. And people have to expand, have to build houses, have to live, have to have homes. And that's why some houses are there and considered unpermitted by the Israeli government. And so they are conducting now a campaign to demolish all these houses. In particular, there is a house in Silwan where 100 people live, one building with 100 people. And this government has already issued a decision to demolish that house. We also see, in addition to everything I've described, seriously critical plans about evicting Palestinians. There is a very good article that was written 2 days ago by Amira Haas in Haaretz, which explains that these people think about ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, trying to repeat what happened in 1948, that is the Nakba, where 70% of the Palestinian population were evicted from their land and ethnically cleansed to become one of the largest refugee population in the world. In addition to the declared policy of this government, they have already initiated a lot of acts of violence and killing against Palestinians. What we witness with this government, as with the previous one, as a matter of fact, is a policy of indiscriminate oppression and persecution of Palestinians. In 2022, with the previous government, the less extreme according to observers, we had 224 Palestinians killed, including 52 children by the Israeli army. And that was the highest number of Palestinians killed in the West Bank since 2005. This government, the new government, and starting from the 1st of January, has already killed 42 Palestinians, including 8 children and an older lady at the age of 61. They also conducted the massacre in Jenin camp, again, killing 10 people, including that lady. And it is interesting to look at what Ben-Gvir said when he took over the responsibility of the Israeli police. What did he say to the head of the police branch in Jerusalem? He said to him, close your eyes and do to Palestinians whatever you dreamt about. He also said to settlers, you have to arm and you have to shoot any Palestinian that you suspect. He also said, if somebody throws a stone at you, shoot him immediately. That is the kind of behavior that we witness today, with so many innocent Palestinians being killed without even committing anything. And then they would claim they were trying to stab, or they were trying to crush us with cars. And later, maybe they will apologize and say, yes, it wasn't like that. But that the person is dead. He was already killed. What worries us also are acts that are taken by this government to enhance suppression of rights for Palestinian prisoners in Israeli prisons. In addition, of course, to collective punishment acts that are happening. When a Palestinian was involved in shooting Israelis recently, the decision this government took was to immediately close his house, evicting his whole family, and conducting collective punishment against the whole neighborhood. 40 people were arrested, although they had nothing to do with the act itself. Most recently, we had a visit of Mr. Blinken, the State Secretary of the United States, as well as the National Security Advisor and the head of the CIA. And we thought maybe this time they will do something to restrain this government. Unfortunately, all they did was to pressure the Palestinian Authority to re-establish the security coordination with the occupying power, and actually to propose, as some reporters reported, to propose a plan to re-equip Palestinian police and then make a plan for it to attack Palestinians in Jenin and Nablus. So basically, the plan is about initiating Palestinian internal civil war while we are all under occupation and under Israeli oppression. Unfortunately, this Biden government, when it comes to the Palestinian issue, is absolutely and totally biased to Israel and absolutely weak in front of Israel. Even the little things they have promised to do more than, 2 years ago, like reopening the American embassy, the American consulate in East Jerusalem, this has not happened. The promise to reopen the PLO office in Washington, it did not happen. Even the little thing of pushing the Israelis to allow Palestinians to have 24 hours open borders with Jordan through the bridge, which is the only passage for Palestinians to the outside world, even that they couldn't do. When they were asked by the Palestinian side in the meetings about the need for a new American political initiative to reinitiate talks between the two sides, their response was, we will pressure so that you can have 4G in your telephones. They speak sometimes about economic aid, but actually it is so little and so unmeaningful. Just to give you an example, the United States will increase its support to UNRWA by $50 million. The amount of money that Israel is withholding from our tax revenue, the money that we pay as taxes from us, the Palestinians, they're withholding no less than $1 billion, crippling actually the possibility of having proper educational and health services. It is so unfortunate that when Mr. Blinken was visiting, he continued to dehumanize Palestinians, calling Palestinian struggle terrorism. And when it comes to issues like the massacre that was conducted by the Israeli army in Jenin, he started speaking only about violence, as if we, the Palestinians, are the ones who are occupying the Israeli side. Even in the case of Shireen Abu Akleh, who was a Palestinian, but also American journalist, and who worked for Al Jazeera, and I am sure you all knew about her case. Even the American demand to have an independent investigation of her death was not accepted by Israel, and the Americans kept silent about it. If the United States really wanted peace here, they could at least force Israel to stop settlement activities immediately. But this did not happen. It's not happening, and I don't think it will happen. So all in all, the situation is very explosive. Among Palestinians, and especially among young Palestinians, there is a great amount of anger, frustration, disappointment, lack of trust, not only, of course, in the Israelis, and the lack of trust in the international community, but even lack of interest in the Palestinian Authority itself, especially after the decision of the Palestinian Authority to cancel elections and dissolving our parliament and creating a situation of total lack of democracy. And that, of course, frustrates people even more. The deep conviction among Palestinians today is that nobody in the world will care about us, and the international official community, at least, will not care about us unless we resist on the ground, unless we resist the injustice that we are subjected to, and impose our presence on the international agenda. I must tell you, I'm quite worried that there are four things that could lead to a total explosion here in Palestine. One is a continuation of the rise of the number of killing of Palestinians. Like the two massacres that happened, one in Jenin where 10 people were killed in 2 hours, and in Jericho with 5 people killed in also 2 hours. The second factor that could lead to an explosion is further punitive acts against Palestinians in Israeli prisons. A third one, if this Israeli government proceeds with their plans of ethnically cleanse communities in Area C, like Sheikh Jarrah in Jerusalem, Al-Khan al-Ahmar in Area C, and Masafir Yatta, where 8 communities in the south of Hebron, in Yatta area, are threatened to be evicted because there is a high court Israeli decision to evict them from their homes. And the fourth point that could really lead to a big explosion is what could happen in the Aqsa Mosque with the continuation of the continuous provocations from the Israeli settlers and the Israeli extreme fundamentalists, especially during next Ramadan, which will coincide with Jewish Pesach this year. The big question here is, where is the international community when it comes to the Palestinian issue? And with some exceptions, of course, I mean, we have exceptional cases like the case of South African government and the strong positions of some Irish parties, etc. With the few exceptions, most governments, unfortunately, are following double standard. The best case here to compare the positions is to look at the behavior in Ukraine and the behavior in Palestine. 10,000 punitive acts against Russia in less than 2 months, 10,000 sanctions, and not a single sanction on Israel after 55 years of occupation and 75 years of ethnic cleansing, and with a situation of apartheid. Because what we face is nothing but a system of apartheid. There is a big silence about the crimes that Israel is committing, and there is unfortunately an adoption of the Israeli narrative and an acceptance and sometimes participation by many governments in dehumanizing Palestinians and dehumanizing the Palestinian struggle. To give you an idea, and to finish my talk today, let me just tell a few things. Imagine the situation where 371 bodies of Palestinians killed by the Israeli army, or Palestinians who died in prison, are still withheld by the Israeli authorities, and they are not allowed to be buried, including 11 prisoners who died in prison but did not finish their term, and they have to stay in prison. They have to stay. Their bodies have to be withheld till they finish their imprisonment term. Where does that happen anywhere in the world? one of the Palestinian prisoners, his name is Abdullah Barghouti, is sentenced to 67 life imprisonments, 67 life imprisonment plus 5,200 years. When this man dies, he has to stay in prison. His body has to stay in prison for the 6,000 years to come. The most touching thing I've encountered recently was a meeting with mothers of young children who were killed by the Israeli army. We're talking about 15, 16, 17 years old boys. And one mother told me, all I want is to be able to cry on my son's grave. They are denying me the possibility of having a grave where I can go and visit the body of my son and cry. I mean, whatever you look at, I don't think there is this level of injustice anywhere. The lands of the people are taken away by force. Even the Dead Sea, we are not allowed to go to the Dead Sea. I mean, any tourist can go, of course. We, the Palestinians, cannot go to the Dead Sea, even in the area which we should be responsible for, except a very little piece, which is half square kilometer. And we can go there only till 4 p.m., after which time it becomes Jewish-only place, like the rest of the Dead Sea. They are talking about taking away citizenship from prisoners, Palestinian prisoners. But they're not doing that to Yigal Amir, for instance, who committed the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, or to that settler who burned a family alive, the family of Dawabshi, a mother, a father, a little baby, and left a second child completely burned. People who marry, I mean, if a Palestinian in the West Bank marries a woman in Jerusalem, or a woman in the West Bank marries a Palestinian in East Jerusalem, they are not allowed to live together. It is forbidden for them to be together. Thousands of Palestinians in Gaza are not allowed to leave to get treatment, which they don't have in Gaza because of the siege, neither in the West Bank or in Israel itself. I had a case of a young girl who was only 19 months old, who needed a simple heart surgery, which we could easily do in Jerusalem to save her life, And unfortunately, she was not allowed to cross with her family, and she died. Today, we have 642 military checkpoints across the West Bank. These checkpoints cost us 300 million hours of time that we spend at checkpoints, which is worth $420 million, including the gasoline, extra gasoline that we have to spend. I don't know if you know, but Israel confiscates 85% of the water of the West Bank, allows a Palestinian to use no more than 50 cubic meters per year per capita, while an illegal settler in the West Bank is allowed to use 2,400, 48 times more than Palestinians. The major roads in the West Bank today are segregated. The highways are segregated. They are Jewish-only highways, or Israeli-only highways, to be precise. If we are caught walking or driving on any of these roads, we can be put in jail for 6 months. This is not only apartheid, but as my very close friend Ronnie Casrils, who used to be a minister in the South African first anti-apartheid government with Nelson Mandela, as he told me once, what you have is much worse than the system of apartheid that we had in South Africa. So what we have here is, in addition to everything that I explained, is a rise of very dangerous fascism that could commit very serious crimes, and the response to that should be boycott, divestment, sanctions against this government. And we ask you, we hope you can make and exercise the utmost possible pressure on your government to stop this policy of hypocrisy and to stop the passage of this terrible bill against BDS. I mean, for God's sake, what is happening is nothing but punishing the victim in this situation. I thank you for all your solidarity. I know many of you have done so much for Palestinian cause, and I know that your hearts are with us and your will is with us. But at this very moment, we really need to mobilize the utmost possible amount of power to stand up to this rising fascism in this area. Thank you so much.
Dr. Barghouti, thank you so much for joining us and going through that really awful and heartrending presentation. I should just tell you that we have 250 people on the call, and they're from all over. They're in London, in Liverpool, in Brighton, in Colchester, in Chelmsford, in Edinburgh, in Angus, in York, in South Wales, in Hull, in Oxford, Bradford, Birmingham, Lichfield, Leamington Spa, Manchester, and many other places. Also, we have people on the call from Indonesia and from the US, because although the US government is of no help whatsoever, there are people in the United States whom we know help support and work for the Palestinian case and cause. I have some questions that I'm going to put to you, Dr. Barghouti, if that's okay. I'll do three and then ask you if you want to make any remarks in response to those, and then I've got a few more. The first one is actually about something that you've already referenced in your remarks, which is the situation in Mustafa Yatta. So if you want to amplify that, that's fine. Una Ellis says, what are Arab countries doing in response to these developments in Israel and in Palestine? And Patrick on Zoom also asks an interesting question. He says, should we be for Palestinian rights or for Palestinian freedom from Israeli oppression and Israeli occupation? They may for many of us be the same thing. But anyway, if you want to consider some remarks on those questions, and then I'll see what else we've got time to fit in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I'll try to respond to your questions. First of all, regarding Mustafa Yatta, we are talking here about 8 communities who are living in very poor conditions, and the people there are not allowed to have houses. They're not allowed to build schools or kindergartens or clinics or anything. Some of them live in caves because their houses were already demolished by the Israeli army. And the Israeli army claims that they want their land for military training, and they want to evict the people from that area. What is interesting is that the population of these 8 communities have already been evicted from Israel, from what is called Israel today, I mean from Palestine, in 1952 by the Israeli army itself. So this would be the second time the Israelis try to evict them from their homes. And these people have no other place to go to. They will simply become homeless, like the case of the 100 people living in that building in Silwan near Jerusalem. And the people went to courts, and the High Court decided they have to be evicted. That's the Israeli court decision. And what we worry about now is that this Israeli government might proceed and do that. This is the case of Mustafa Yatta. We demonstrate there constantly. We try to provide protection. We try to organize mobile clinics for these people through Palestinian non-governmental organization, Medical Relief. And we try to sustain their steadfastness as much as we can, but the threat is there and it's very high. Regarding Arab countries, here you can't generalize actually, because there are different Arab countries with different governments and different policies. You can't compare, for instance, the Emirates with Algeria. Algeria is 100% with Palestinians and trying to support as much as they can. But there are countries who have started normalization with Israel. And this is Netanyahu's plan, actually. His plan is to normalize with Arab countries. at the expense of the Palestinian cause, trying to marginalize the Palestinian cause and maybe even liquidate it if he could. And as he declared in a most recent interview with CNN, he said, our plan is to normalize with Arab countries. And then at the end, this way we finish the Israeli-Arab conflict, and then we come back to Palestinians and impose what he called practical peace. And by practical peace, he meant that we would be, we would submit to his system of apartheid till he finds a way of ethnically cleanse us. So unfortunately, not all Arab countries are with us. Some of these governments are normalizing with this system of oppression. But as you understand, these are the positions of some governments, but not the positions of their own people. Actually, the most remarkable thing we've seen during the Mondial in Qatar was the amount of solidarity with Palestine. The single most carried flag and during the whole Mondial was the Palestinian flag. Even the Moroccan team, I mean, you know, the Moroccan government also normalized with Israel. The Moroccan team would carry the Palestinian flag every time they made a victory. So I think what you see here is a very big gap between some governments and their people. And of course, Netanyahu is obsessed with having relations with oppressive regimes in the Arab countries, especially, for instance, most recently with Sudan. And these are authoritarian dictatorships that impose on their people their authority, but also try to impose on their people the normalization with Israel. But that does not frighten us, actually. I mean, the very good example here is Jordan and Egypt. Although there are diplomatic relations with Israel for decades now, there is no normalization whatsoever with the people, because the people of Egypt and the people of Jordan are totally supportive of the Palestinian struggle, and they are totally against occupation and the system of apartheid. Do we support Palestinian rights for equality or for freedom? There is no difference. If you support the right of the Palestinians to be free, then you are supporting the right to be treated as equal human beings. But maybe your question refers to something else, which is, do we still speak about independent Palestinian state and two-state solution, or something else? Probably I would say something else. I think with Israel destroying the two-state solution, the alternative that they promote here is, of course, a system of apartheid, but our alternative is different. And the alternative is one democratic free state with full democracy and equal rights for everybody, equal rights and equal duties. The vast majority of young Palestinians believe in that today. And the whole idea of two-state solution has already been destroyed by Netanyahu himself.
Thank you very much for those responses, Dr. Barghouti. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions that have come up. One is from Jeff, who says, is the right of return for refugees still a key demand? And he says, what can we do about it? And there are a number of kind of linked questions about what our priorities, so in Britain, what our priorities should be to focus actions on. And from Hugh, he says, what is the best and most positive event or development that you have written recently?
Can you repeat Hugh's question again, please?
Yeah, Hugh's question is, what is the best or most positive event or development that you have witnessed recently?
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a teacher asking about the fact that BDS, the policy of BDS, which obviously the union support, is threatened, as you know, with legislation. So this person wants to know how best you think we can resist that attack. I have to say it's a difficult question, but we do have to find ways to resist. And from Chris on Zoom, government's plans for Palestinians with Israeli citizenship, like many of my relatives, he says, in addition to the threats to remove citizenship from prisoners. What have you got that you could say about that?
Okay.
I think that's quite a wide-ranging set of questions, but clearly people are very anxious to know if you have any specific suggestions of things that you feel that we should be doing here in Britain in solidarity. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Well, first of all, about the right of return for refugees, of course, we are fully demanding that and fully supporting that, and without exclusion. It's the right of everybody who was forced out of his town or out of his village or out of his country to be allowed to come back. That's what international law says. When we speak about one-state solution, it should be clear here, and we speak about equality. Sorry, we are not only speaking about equality in civil rights, we are also speaking about equality in national rights. And that means the right of self-determination for Palestinians. It also means that every refugee anywhere in the world, every Palestinian refugee should have the right to come back to that unified state. And that is what we struggle for. And most recently, the movement I belong to, the Palestinian National Initiative, has just had its democratic Congress. It was an amazing democratic process, actually, with the 61 regional congresses, eventually with the biggest congress that took place the beginning of last month. And the conclusion of the Mubadara, the initiative, was that the Palestinian national goal should not be only ending occupation, but also ending and bringing down the whole system of apartheid in the whole of Palestine. And that takes me to the question of the Palestinians who live in Israel and who carry the Israeli citizenship. As you have seen in the reports of Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, as well as B'Tselem report, they are also subjected to the same system of apartheid. And so they are also subjected to the same level of racism. And that's where we see that the future of Palestinian struggle is about unifying the struggle of those who live inside Israel with those who are living in the occupied territories and those who are in the diaspora. And the reunification of that struggle together will be able to change the balance of power against what fascist Zionists try to do. On the question of what is the priority, I think there are two major priorities here. One priority for those who support Palestine is to bring the truth to the people and to bring in the Palestinian narrative. We are ready to help in every possible way. We are ready to send delegations if you need. We're ready to send you material. But it is very important to overcome the bias in the foreign press when it comes to the question of the Palestinian narrative. And I think especially working with young people in universities and even in schools about the truth about the right narrative is very important. But the main priority remains demanding boycott, divestment, and sanctions against this fascist government. I do believe that this new government, with the severe extremism that it represents, provides an unprecedented opportunity for all of us in support of the Palestinian rights to enhance and conduct a wide range demand of applying BDS. What is the most positive thing that I have witnessed? Well, most recently we had a fantastic youth conference where Palestinian youth met with young people coming from different parts of the world. Many of these guys did not know much about Palestine. And they spent with us only 4 days. But it was amazing to see the change with the people seeing the reality by their own eyes. It really made me much more confident. I was always confident, but this made me really much more confident about the fact that we should believe in human beings, and we should believe in the ability of every human being to see the truth if they have the chance to. And that's why I think the advocacy work we do and you do is very effective and important. But to add to that, I was very happy today to hear about a piece of news which came from Barcelona, where the municipality of Barcelona decided not only to boycott Israel and to adopt BDS completely, but also to eliminate the twinning agreement they have with Tel Aviv municipality. That is a very good example of what can be achieved in the coming period. And I think that relates to the issue of the policy of BDS. I think I answered the questions.
I think you did. You absolutely did. I've just got one last one that I'm going to put to you, and then I'd like you to just reinforce for us anything more or different or additional that you think we should be doing. There is a question from Robin who talks about his own experience of direct action and being arrested, and he asks you, what is your attitude to direct action? He cites the idea of jumping in front of apartheid bulldozers, for example. So if you want to make some remarks about that, that's fine. But otherwise, if you would like to make some closing remarks, we'd be very pleased to have them.
Well, I mean, these people who are doing direct actions are heroic, actually. I mean, we've seen people losing their lives in that process. I don't want anybody to lose their lives. I hope we can engage in actions and try to save our lives at the same time. But it's a very noble act, which I respect very much. I don't have much to add in terms of explaining the situation here, but I do believe that we can make a difference. I do believe that you can make a difference. And I think we have to be optimistic. And I think there is every reason why we can be optimistic. We live in a difficult world. We have seen the rise of imperialistic behavior everywhere. And I would say racism actually is becoming the most clear and obvious expression of colonialism and of colonialist thinking. Racism is the disease of this century. And that is something we have to fight. And in my opinion, here where we have to make the link, and maybe you can make the link, between the fight against colonialism, oppression, and discrimination worldwide and what is happening in Palestine. Because in particular, this kind of racism we are subjected to should be a unifying matter of all peoples of the world who believe in equality, who believe in human rights, and who believe in democracy. And that's where I think we can make together very good efforts. I'm so encouraged, and my heart is so warmed by having so many people like yourself attending such a session and then working so much for Palestine from so many different parts of Britain and the world. And that, believe me, that gives us a lot of hope and a lot of courage to encounter all the discrimination and injustice that we are fighting. Maybe the best way of putting it is to say that really the struggle of the Palestinian people for freedom is nothing but a struggle for justice. When you fight in your own country for justice for people for workers, when you fight for justice for women who are discriminated against, when you conduct a struggle against gender-based violence, you are struggling for justice. And I think that's where we have to make the link to the Palestinian issue. It is nothing but a struggle for justice. Thank you so much.
Dr. Barghouti, thank you so much for giving us your time this evening. And let me also thank everybody who joined and who had the privilege of hearing from you. I also thank Simon Dubbins, of course, for his earlier remarks. Let me say that from the chair that I think that there are some actions that we can continue to take, even if we've taken them before. This meeting is about Labour and Palestine, but of course there is also the Palestine Solidarity Campaign, not affiliated to any party, that you could also join. It's really important that trade unions continue to send delegations so that when they come back, they can do precisely what Dr. Barghouti has talked about, which is that they can talk about the fact that we need to struggle for justice for the Palestinians as we need to struggle for justice everywhere, but importantly, that we can bring the truth about the Palestinian experience to people here, and we can amplify the voices of Palestinians so that they hear and understand that narrative. Comrades and friends, thank you very much for having joined this evening. I'm sure it's been quite difficult to hear and to listen to at points, but nonetheless, a really important presentation from Dr. Barghouti. Thank you very much, and solidarity to everyone. I close the meeting.
Thanks. Bye.